Hello, this is Paulette Downey, and I'm back again with a word from the Lord. So, yesterday I did post a message on the 10th commandment, and I pulled it down because there were some things that I really felt important to say in the message that I already posted, and that was a long message, to be honest with you. And so, like, some of that really doesn't need to be in there, and some of the things that I want to say I really should be in this message. So I posted it and I pulled it down. And so now I'm going to tell talk about this message on the 10th commandment as though that was like a dress rehearsal, and now this is the real thing. And so I am speaking on the final the final commandment of the 10th commandment, which is you shall not covet. So I'm going to start off with a story. And the story basically is about stories about myself when I was about 7 years old. And I had like when I was 7 years old, I was a Barbie collector. So I collected Barbie. I collected Can, Skipper, like, and all the other, like, there were so many other um, Barbie dolls that were attached to you know, that whole sphere of Barbie's world uh, that I had. So I had a lot of Barbies, and I had a lot of clothing for my Barbies, and I had the furniture. I had, like the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, the campers, like everything. And of course, this was something that accumulated over time. So I began on my journey of having like my whole Barbie, world at 7 years old. And throughout the years, I built it up. So it was something that I built. Of course, my mom paid for this stuff. I didn't, I couldn't, I was a kid. And so, like, she didn't buy everything all at once. She couldn't do that, but she bought this stuff throughout time. And so, like, it took many years just, like, when we buy furniture for our homes, we don't buy everything all at once. We buy it's usually like over time. You buy a kitchen table, then you buy a painting, you buy a bed, and like, it's all over time. And even building your wardrobe, anything. So that's what happened with my Barbie world. So it was built over time. This was something that I invested a lot of my time into, like, throughout the years. And so, basically, when I played with my Barbie dolls, when I played with my toys, I had my baby this and that. I had my, baby alive. But as I got older, of course, then, baby this and that and baby alive, they became obsolete in my life, so to speak, because as I was getting older, they were, for, when you're younger. But my Barbie world, I didn't let go. And so even, as I was growing older, then I was getting 11 and 12, and then 12 and 13. Then, I had my sister, who was 6 years younger than me, and my niece, who is 8 years younger than me. So they wanted to play with me, and they wanted to play, if not even with me, then they wanted me to allow them to play with my Barbie dolls and everything that I had with them. And so I would always decline. Like, I never wanted to play with them, with my Barbie world, and I never wanted them to play with my Barbie stuff, even on their own. Like, I was very protective of my Barbies. My Barbies and everything that I had with them, I was afraid that they were going to destroy them. And I didn't want to play with them when I was playing with them, because that was my time to delve into my imaginary world and my creative world of just in my me time, my time of solace and peace and serenity to myself. So I was very protective of that and of my time. Even back then, like, you think of it, even a child back then, like, I always liked time to myself. That's who I am. I liked a lot of time to myself to this day, but I digress. So yes. So I accumulated a lot of things for Barbie over the years. I would ask my mom to buy all sorts of things throughout the years for my Barbies, all my dolls. But as I'm getting like 14, like 13, 14, I knew that, the day was going to come when I had to give them up. Simply because I was getting, older, was a teenager. And so, like I was going to beauty school when I was 13 years old. And I wore makeup. I wore makeup when I was like 13. I wore makeup at a young age, 13, 14, 15. I wore makeup at a young age. And actually, I wore a lot of makeup, to be very honest with you, because I was very insecure about my looks. But again, I digress. So when I was about 15 years old, I then said to myself, I then said to myself, okay, I gotta sever this. I gotta sever this attachment. That I have with my Barbies. Like I can't continue to, play with them because like now I'm a teenager, I'm 15, even though, I still have the heart of a kid. But I had the heart of a teenager too, because it's like basically a crossing over. So I didn't want to let go of what I was comfortable with and what I was used to. Like that brought me a lot of comfort. It brought me a lot of peace, a lot of comfort. And so I didn't want to let go of that. But at the same time, I knew instinctively. My mom didn't tell me, she didn't force me to stop playing with them. She was very good about doing that, and I appreciate that. That she didn't do that. So it was totally me. It was totally me knowing that this was something that I had to let go. And so like I told you, with my sister and my niece, they always wanted to play with, my Barbie world. And so I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it to them. And that will be a way of me severing any ties with my Barbie dolls. And once I give it to them, I won't be able to take it back from them. And so then I gave it to them. I gave it to them. And in a matter of 2 weeks, 2 weeks, I kid you not, they demolished my Barbie world. It was like my Barbie world did not even exist. It was like all inflatable furniture. Whatever inflatable furniture existed was punctured. The heads were decapitated. The limbs were decapitated. Hair was just, oh my gosh, all tangled. Crayons all over colored crayons on the furniture, on the clothing, everything, clothing torn. Like 2 weeks. 2 weeks. It took me years, from 7 to 15, to build my Barbie world. And I built an expansive Barbie world. And they destroyed it in 2 weeks. I was so hurt. I was so angry. I was angry and I was hurt. I wanted to get mad at them. I wanted to cry. And I couldn't do either because I gave them my Barbie world. Now, about 9 years later, I ended up working downtown in Toronto. So, in the heart of Toronto. And there was the Eaton Center. So Eaton Center was like our main department store, big, huge, beautiful store. And when I would go for lunch, because I would always go out for lunch. And so when I would go out for lunch, I would always, pass through the Eaton Center. And on the main floor at the Eaton Center, they had this display of Barbies. And people were buying them as collectibles. And 9 years later, I learned that I too could have saved my Barbies as collectibles. So the reason why I bring this story to you about my Barbie world is that my niece and my sister, they coveted my Barbie world. They wanted my Barbie world. They even asked, if they could have it when I no longer was going to play with it, because they saw that I was growing, even though they were young, they somehow understood that. And so I told them yes. So they wanted it. And they liked the thought, like how I built it and everything that I had, everything that I acquired for the Barbie world. But they were not equipped to maintain it the way I was. Like they wanted it, they liked it, and when they got it, they destroyed it. They didn't know how to care for it because they didn't. They did not have the attributes in them in order to maintain it the way I did. Now, it had nothing to do with their age because I started building that world when I was 7. So my niece was 7 at the time, and my sister was 9 when I gave it to them. And so it had nothing to do with age, it had everything to do with the unique qualities that they have um, that did not equip them to continue to maintain it the way I did. So we're talking about 3 people, 3 entirely different personalities, completely different personalities. And they wanted something, they coveted something that looked good to them, and they wanted it, but they didn't have the ability to hold on to it. So they're children. They were children at the time when they coveted my Barbie world. They were children. A lot of adults, a lot of adults have the same type of mentality as they who were children did with my Barbie world. So basically, that is the thing with coveting. People covet things that they're not built to maintain, that they were never intended to have, and they covet it because it looks good when they see somebody else with it, not understanding and not realizing that that person doesn't just wake up in the morning and poof, it's there. That whatever an individual has, a lot of work has been put into that in order for it to be what it is. So I'm going to read off scripture, the 10th commandment of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not covet. And so we're going to Exodus 20, and it's going to be verse 17. I remember this from yesterday. Okay, so you must not covet your neighbor's house. You must not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female servant, ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. So yes. So, and the reason, like, one of the main reasons why you shouldn't covet everything, because coveting um, coveting leads, or coveting births. It can birth depending on to the degree of which we covet. It brings about lying on people in order to get what it is they have, stealing from people in order to get what it is they have, murdering people in order to get what they have, adultery in order to get what they have. So it births a lot of the things that God says in the 10 Commandments that we should not be doing. So it gives birth by coveting. Coveting, it's a big one, because like what it does when you act on what it is you covet, what you do as a result of it can be very dangerous. I mean, the fact that you covet alone, I mean, just in your own, like you covet things and you want things. And I mean, we've all been there. We've all been there. I know I've been there, especially as a younger person. I feel that a lot of young people, they do that because, they're not really, they really don't know. They don't really have a sense of who they are. Their identity isn't, like they're still trying to figure out who they are. They're growing up. They're trying to, make their place in the world and establish themselves. So, like by seeing, people, it's natural that you're gonna, you covet things, but it's one thing, okay, and I'm not saying we shouldn't at all, But most people, even if they covet, like you say, there's a guy, and I'm just using that as an example, a guy and a girl and a woman. You see the guy and you like the guy, but he's with someone and you covet him, and you say, I wish I could be with him. These are, like they're natural, especially when you're younger, and you may covet, like so many things when you're younger, and you don't know who you are. Of course, we're not supposed to do this. This is a sin. In most cases, people don't actually go and act on it by actually saying, okay, you know what, like there's the guy, I'm going to try and steal that guy away from that woman, or I'm going to try and steal that job away from that person. Like most people don't act on it, but it is wrong, because even with coveting, even if you don't act on it, um, how you look at yourself, um, like in a negative light, like just by coveting something from somebody else, how you look at yourself and you say, well, I should have this. Like the pride that arises in a person from thinking that they should have something that belongs to somebody else. And pride is a sin God cannot stand. And it is, like I said, with coveting, pride, pride gives birth to so many sins. But there's pride attached to coveting, because when you covet something, then you think that you're entitled to have what it is that you're coveting, and you feel that the person who has it is not entitled to it, and somehow that person is less than you because you want it and you feel that you should have it. So you're looking at that person and you're saying, like, you know what, like that doesn't make sense, that they have this job and I should have this job, and I'm better for this job, even though you may not even be qualified for the job on paper, and the person who is actually doing the job has all the qualifications and has invested several years into acquiring the experience to be doing that job, even though the person rightfully so should be in the position. But when you covet something, it's like you have this kind of grandiose opinion about yourself, that just because you want it, you should be in it, even though you lack the qualifications, you lack the maybe social intelligence, emotional intelligence, actual information, education for the job, but the pride so it brings forth pride, thinking that you're better than the person who is doing what it is you want, or who is with who it is you want to be with, or who has what you think you should have. And you start to put the person down and be very condescending to the person who is actually, who you are actually coveting, or what it is that you're coveting. Like you just feel like it should belong to you. And there's a sense of entitlement there. When in fact it was never meant for you. But now again, and it's almost like you're putting yourself in a position of God. It's almost like you're being a God, and you're saying that this, like, I should be the one who has this. It's like you're now saying that what God has ordained, or what God has given, he messed up somehow. Somehow he doesn't know what he's doing. Somehow he got amnesia, or he forgot, and he forgot to put you, who has no kind of aptitude for what it is you want. Somehow he should have just slid you in there. And so it's prideful. It's like almost like a godlike complex. It brings out so many of the worst traits in a person when you simply covet something of somebody else's, because you're entitled. It should be for you, regardless of experience, regardless of you having no experience and that person probably having 20 years experience and then the education to go behind it. But it should be you, because that's what you want. So coveting is it's just like it's like insulting God. It's like telling God he didn't know what he was doing when he handed out things and when he did what he did and how he's given it out to people and distributed various things, various gifts when he was gifting people. So, yes, so that's the problem with coveting. And so, and I do, I like to think about, I think about King David, think about King Saul, perfect example. When, like Saul was king for 40 years, and he had King David as an employee of his, playing the harp, because he because of his disobedience to God. God required, him to carry out instructions on a few occasions, and he didn't carry those out. And he lost his calling. He lost that anointing. But just because he lost that anointing, he was still king. He was still king of Israel, and so he also lost the Holy Spirit. So he needed King David. King David knew how to play the harp, and so when King David played the harp, and of course King David was full with the Holy Spirit, and so when he played the harp, then the Holy Spirit would come in the presence of that environment in which Saul was in, and then that would calm him and push away the demons that were tormenting him as a result of the Holy Spirit leaving him. So when King David slayed when he slayed Goliath, he became a national hero in Jerusalem. And so when the ladies were singing, that King Saul slays 10,000, or no, King Saul slays 1,000, and King or David slays 10,000. That really rattled King Saul. Saul, and so that really rattled him. And from that point on, he was very jealous of King David. And even though he knew King David was anointed, he knew King David was going to be the next king of Israel. But for the next 17 years, King David was on the run simply because he was David at that time. So, but David was on the run because King Saul was trying to kill him. So Saul spent his final years, 17 years, trying to kill the next king of Israel as a result of his jealousy. And, he had 1,000, and he had a lot. So, yes, 10,000 is what is what David had. He had 1,000. He had a lot. That was a lot. It wasn't 10,000, but it was a lot. And in this world, there's always going to be somebody who has more. It's just going to be always. There's always going to be somebody who has more. And so in this case, but he had a lot, and he wasn't happy with what he had. And basically, he couldn't be trusted. He couldn't be trusted. And that's why he slays 1,000. And that's why King David slays 10,000, because King David could be trusted. King David knew how to repent whenever, he was called out on sin. He knew how to humble himself, something King Saul did not know how to do. King Saul did not know how to humble himself when confronted, when being told that, what, you messed up here. So he didn't know how to confess his sins and humble himself before God. And he continued to make the same types of mistakes because he was too concerned about what people thought. He wasn't concerned about the heart of God and what it was that God wanted. Whereas David was a man after God's heart. He was concerned about the burdens and the things that were on God's heart. And so God, and I truly believe that God gives more to those he can trust. And that's just the way it is. If he can't trust you, how can he give you more? And that's another case when we're talking about the talents. So he gave, like three gentlemen. One gentleman, he gave 5 talents. Another gentleman, he gave 2 talents. And the third gentleman, he gave 1 talent. So the one with the 5 talents, he invested it, he got another 5 back. The one with the 2 talents, he invested it, he got another 2 back. The one with the 1 talent was afraid. He didn't invest it. He hid it under the dirt and he let it sit there. He didn't even put it in the bank to get any kind of interest. So when the master came back, he rewarded the gentleman who, invested the 5 talents and the one who invested the 2 talents, but the 1 talent, he actually stripped that person of the 1 talent he had and he gave it to the person who had 10 talents. So talents are representing gifts. God gives everyone gifts according to their ability. So the one who had 5 talents he had the ability to handle the 5 talents. And the one who had 2 was able to handle the 2. And the one who had 1 was able to handle the 1, but he squandered his talent. So a lot of people, they are given gifts, they are given talents, and they do nothing with their talents. And God takes away the talents that he has given them. And then, it has to fall on somebody else. And, and then people get upset. And, they get upset with God and say that it was God who did this to them, when in fact they didn't do anything to improve themselves. And then they go covet things that other people have. And so, yeah. So this is why it's so important that we not covet and that we focus on what God has given us, and we build upon what God has given us. Now, I do want to talk about, what exactly do people covet? What are the things that people covet? So people covet, one thing that people covet is a status. People, they covet the status that somebody else has in the community. They covet things like fame, if they covet, when they see people who are in the public eye, who are famous, political figures, anyone who has some kind of platform, people covet that. There are a lot of people who covet that, and they want that. Like they want it, and they, even though they're not in the public eye, it's something that they covet, and they wonder, like, why can't they be in the public eye? And it's very dangerous, because you see people who are in the public eye in various ways, and yeah, I wanted to say something, but anyway, so you see in various ways, and we don't know what it took for them to get there. We do not have a clue as the kind of work that was involved in them getting into the position or into the place that they are in, to have the fame, to have the status, to have the platform. We don't know what they went through. Now, because they're not going to display that. You're not seeing all the pain and the nights that they spent on whatever it is that they specialize in. You didn't see all the nights that they were, agonizing and, working on it to get to where they are. You just see the final results. And so the final results look glamorous when you see them, talking on television, like doing, some kind of speech, or if you see them, performing, or if you see them, in a play or in a movie or something, you're just seeing the end result of something that took years for them to master. Like, it took years for them to be able to go on the stage and perform. It took years for them to be the president. It took years for them to be a singer. It took years. you don't know what kind of agony and what kind of pain that they went through in order to get to that. They're not showing you that. They're not showing you that. And so, a lot of people, they just, they look at the final product and they think, I can do it too. And in many cases, you can't. In many cases, you can't. That's why you're not doing it, because it wasn't meant for you. And what we don't know how well they are holding up. We don't know, like, just because it looks all, they look like they're calm and relaxed. We don't know what kind of emotional stress they are dealing with as a result of that. We don't know what kind of mental stress that they are dealing with as a result of that. We don't know. And you don't know. And, some people aren't built mentally and emotionally to take what other people are taking. Like, I mean, it's hard for them, but they are built to sustain that. And you don't know what kind of care that they have to go through as a result. And in many cases, if you were to go through that and, go for that, you probably would, after experiencing it, you'd probably say, you know what, give me the life that I had back. Like, I don't want, if this is what I have to go through in order to have that, then no. But again, I think in many cases when people are, when it's about the accolades and, being loved by so many people, it's because the individuals don't love themselves. And so they're looking for acceptance. They're looking for approval from other people. And so this is why they're looking for all the accolades. And, this is why they covet the stage and they covet, being in the spotlight and having all these followers and having the big platforms, because there's something lacking in the individual, that is, they need to be reassured. They need assurance that they are enough. And they, of course, they don't love themselves, because love begins with loving you. You need to know how to love yourself. And with knowing how to love yourself, then you can love God. And then, loving God, you don't need all that stuff. You don't need the fame. You don't need the platform. You don't need that. You don't need, to have, an audience of people, saying how beautiful you are and how wonderful you are and how perfect you are and how amazing and awesome you are. You don't need the approval of the world. When you learn to love yourself and when you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and you learn how to love God, when you spend time with Him, all of that doesn't matter. So there is a deficiency in an individual when they are coveting the spotlight, when they are coveting accolades from other people, and when they are coveting people who are in the spotlight and saying they wish they were in the spotlight and saying, there is a deficiency. There is something very wrong with the person and what is happening inside of them. And so, and so with coveting, really and truly, there is a deficiency. There's a deficit in what we, what's going on in us. So when just want to talk about this, when I and maybe I should talk about this more like positions and everything, but that's, I can talk about this anyway. So, I mean, this has nothing to do with fame or anything like that. And, but this does have to do with basically, and I'm going to use myself, I'm going to talk about myself. And I know for myself, like, when, after I finished college and, I had my first full-time job, when I had my first full-time office job, and I was working downtown in Toronto because that's Canadian. And so when I was working downtown Toronto, and so of course I met a lot of people in my office, and I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot from them. They exposed me to a world that I was never exposed to before. And so when you get out of college, when you're like in your 20s, and I think everyone who finished college can relate to this. When you just get out of college, you kind of think you know everything. You kind of just think that you know, like, yeah, I know it all, and I can have every conversation that is presented to me. And so, and I was a follower. Like I was a follower of God. This was before I backslid. And so, but you think you know everything. Like you've arrived. You do. You think you arrived. Well, that's how I thought anyway. And so, and I've seen it. Like I've seen it. Like as I became as I became older, and then I see the young ones coming out of school, I saw them doing the same thing that I did. And so, I think for the most part, it's pretty common. But then being around these people, I realized that I'm not all that I think I am. And like they really humbled me because I really realized that there was so much. Like I said, they opened me up to a whole new world, and they just introduced me to things that I had never been exposed to before. And we would always have like really nice conversations. We would go out to lunch. Like I would go to lunch with these people, and we would talk about current events and politics, and things like that. And some things like some conversations I could have, like the current events at that time I could have because it was current events. So I mean, I was current in the current events. But then, because they had lived longer, of course, there were things that I couldn't talk about because, I wasn't born, or like I wasn't born, or even if I was born, I was too young to really to know a lot of it. So I mean, like they had a lot of years on me, and of course they were educated people, and they were people who were lifelong learners, and so of course they knew more than me, and so I knew when I was out of my league. I knew, that I'm out of my league, and so I'm just going to listen. Like I knew, like if I'm out of my league, if I don't know something, I know how to shut up and just take information in and learn, because I do love learning. And so but I wanted what they had. Like I wanted to be able, because they could talk about anything. They could talk about so many things, and I was limited simply because I wasn't, I wasn't old enough, and I didn't have that kind of exposure. And so I wanted to be that person that could talk about everything. But I didn't hate on the women or hate on the people and want to tear them down because they had attributes and they had skill sets and they had knowledge that I didn't have. I just wanted what they wanted. And I knew that I could have what they wanted, but I knew it was going to take me years to acquire that. And so I was really grateful that God, opened me up to that world so that I could, like I aspired for that. They were inspiration for me to make me a better person and expand on my giftings that God has, given me. I set myself out to do that. And I am a lifelong learner. I believe, wholeheartedly in continuing education, and I've done it like continuously throughout the years as a result of that. And like staying in tune to current events and everything. And but that takes work. Like all of this is work. It's not just something that you just wish for, or say that you're going to knock someone off their chair and then you're going to sit in it with your lack of education, or lack of experience, or lack of emotional intelligence, or whatever other aptitudes that you need in order to be in certain positions. That is an immaturity, and this is one thing that coveting, it really does expose. It exposes immaturity in individuals, and the individual being underdeveloped, and really and truly our identity. Our identity comes from God. our identity, because God has given us all gifts and talents. He's known of our gifts and talents even before the ages. And having a relationship with God, submitting our lives to God, dying to our selfish needs, dying to the things that we want or that we think are right for us or that we think is going to benefit us, dying to all of that and saying, you know what, God, I surrender my life to you. I give my life to you. And wherever you lead me is where I will go. And this is where you find your identity. This is where you find who you are. And this is when you begin to not covet things that are not meant for you. It is here when you die to yourself, when you allow God to lead you, because He's leading you. So He's leading you and He's going to expose in you who you are, your true identity. And when you know who you are, then you can celebrate other people with whatever giftings what they have. If they have 1 billion and you have 100,000, you're not going to be jealous of them because they have 1 billion and you have 100,000. You're going to be able to celebrate them. You're not going to say, well, you know what, I don't want that person with that billion. That person shouldn't have that $1 billion. I should have that $1 billion. And you don't know what it took for them to have to, get that. And, you probably don't even have the traits and the skill set in order to get that. But you're not thinking that because you know who you are and you're comfortable with who you are and with who God made you to be. So you are not threatened by someone who has $1 billion and you have $100,000, because it doesn't matter if that person has $1 billion. Someone can have $1 billion and have the most miserable life. Yes, they can buy the finest things. Yes, they can fly anywhere. But wherever they go, their misery is going with them. You don't know what the person may be going through. So just looking at someone being able to live a luxurious life does not mean that it doesn't even mean that they are content with who they are. Many people who have a lot of money are not content with who they are. They are not happy with who they are. So when you are coveting people, you don't even know what you are coveting. You don't know what state their life is in. When you are coveting someone, they look good. Of course, they're not going to show you their bad days when you see them in public. You're only going to see them put their best face forward. That's the only thing they can show. They're not going to show anything else. But that doesn't mean that because you're seeing their best face forward, that everything is rosy behind closed doors. You don't know what people are going through. So when you're coveting people, you're also coveting the things that they've gone through, like the things that they had to endure to get to where they are. So you're not just coveting, the 15 minutes that you see them on the stage, or the 20 minutes that you see them, you see them all glamorous in the photos and whatnot. You're not just coveting that. There is a whole string of things that have happened that have prepared them for that, photo. And a lot of things weren't good things. So when we're coveting people, you need to covet everything. Like, you need to covet the bad. And in most cases, with most people, and especially, when you're into, you're the type of person who is into coveting, you are not willing to go through what that person went through in order to have what they have. You just want the instant. You want the microwave version. And the microwave version doesn't really have as much sustainability as the oven or the crock pot. It just doesn't. And so when you are coveting, in many cases, you don't know what you're coveting. Just like when you're, like some people covet people's spouses. And like, you don't know if you have they have that spouse for a reason, like God gave them the anointing to be with that person. And they may look good together and they may look wonderful together. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors. I'm not saying that the marriage is, terrible or anything, but you don't know. and somehow you think that you'd be better suited for that person than the person who is actually married to them. Somehow you have this kind of like fairy tale fantasy that you're right for them, even though you don't know them that well, or even what little you do know, and then you add on to the person, and somehow you think being with the person you would be just more suited for them, and they would like you're more for them, and why is that person with them? I'm with women I'm more beautiful. I mean, if that sustains a marriage, but it's this kind of thinking, this kind of little thinking that people think, or for the man, like I'm more handsome, I have more money. I have more money. I can take better care of her than any of these suitors, because but the man she's with, like I have money, so I'm better. Doesn't matter. Having more money isn't going to make someone more happy. A lot of people in relationships, and I know these people. I know these people personally. I know these people, and they're with people, and some of them even told me they married the men for money, and they're absolutely miserable. I know these people. They're miserable. They can buy whatever they want, shop anywhere, and they're miserable. And some of them have said that's the price that they pay because they wanted to be with the person for the money. So they complain about the affairs, and in turn, they may have affairs, but they complain about the affairs and they complain about the attitude, but they marry the person for the money, but they are miserable. They are miserable. So, I mean, but people who have done that, they deliberately, like they knew why they were marrying the individual. They knew that they were marrying the individual for the money, and it was not for anything else. Like it wasn't for love. And so, like it, and there are people who do that. But like I said, when you're coveting someone, you don't know what you're coveting. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So it's very important that we don't just look at someone and say that we should have what they have. Like you're not God, and that's a sin. Like going around saying that this is yours and you should have this, and that person isn't like, and most cases you're not capable. That's why you're not doing it. And so, but our identity is wrapped up in our relationship with Jesus Christ. It's wrapped up in our relationship with Jesus Christ. If you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, Jesus will expose who you are. He will expose who you are, and you will be happy with who you are. Because God knows, like God knows us. He knows us better than we know ourselves. So he knows what's right for us. He knows what's right for us. He knows who's right for us. He knows. We don't. We think we do. We do. We think, we know what is right for us. And, but when you give your life to God and he shows you, it's just your mind is blown away. And what God has for you is so much bigger than what you imagine for yourself, what you think is right for you. And it may be in most cases, it's completely different from what you think is right for you. But it's so much better than what is right for you. I mean, honestly, I thought that event planning was going to be my life. I really did. Like, I thought that was going to be my career. I did. And, like I went to school for it. I did public relations, which, event management is a discipline of public relations. But then I wanted to be a specialist. I wanted to make sure that I had that specialization in event management. And so then I, pursued, education as an event planner, in event management to get my certification as an event manager. I even have a certification as a wedding planner. Like just to cover all all the ends in planning events, weddings, festivals, conferences. So like I invested a lot of education, a lot of time, and I did plan some weddings as well. And it was a big shock to me when God revealed that it was the beauty industry that He had for me all along. And it was never, He wanted me to have the event management, but it was always the beauty industry. So it was, yeah. So that was not something I planned. I love beauty. I love fashion. But I never ever dreamed of ever, being in it. So I mean, and it's a beautiful. Like I'm happy to be in it. I'm happy. I'm so happy. I'm happy that it is the beauty industry. So you don't know the plans that God has for. We don't know the plans that God has for us, and you're not going to know them until you submit and you make Him your number one. Like you actually, give your life to Him and die to your selfish needs and just let Him know that what, like this is what I want. This is what I'm dreaming of, but I trust you and I surrender it to you, and I'm willing to just let go of it and, accept whatever it is that you have for me. And you'll be amazed and you'll be surprised at what He has for you. But coveting is, it's basically insulting God and telling God that He didn't know what He was doing. And I mean, since God is the one who created the universe, all the heavens, all life, all forms of life, I think He knows what He's doing. I think He has an idea of what He's doing. I mean, we don't even like our brains, even the most intelligent of people, excuse me, even the most intelligent of people just know like a fraction of probably like our basically it says like our the people who like the wisdom of man like the wisdom of man is the foolish thinking of God, and the foolish thinking of God is even higher than the like I'm wording it wrong, but even the foolish thinking of God is higher than the person who has the greatest wisdom of man. So the wisest of man does not even measure to the foolishness of God. So He knows everything because He made us. So He knows each and every one of us, and He knows you, and He knows what's right for you. And so, coveting, and like I said, that was one thing. People also covet people's money, and I kind of mentioned that about coveting money, and you don't know when you covet money, you don't know what you could be protected from. Like if certain people had the kind of money that they want to have, excuse me, you don't know what kind of life you would have had as a result of having money and where that life could have taken you. And it could be far worse than the life you have now. You don't know that, but God does. So we don't know the things that we're being protected by when God withholds us from having certain things. We think that He's punishing us, or that He doesn't want good things for us, and He does. But sometimes we are not prepared for the things that we want. We're not prepared for them, and that's why we don't have them. And like if you don't submit yourself to God, like if you don't get in a position where you allow Him to do the work in you, you may never be prepared to have the things God has for you. And if you're just going to live kind of like in the lowest common denominator kind of thinking, where you're just fighting and bickering and being jealous of people, and trying to tear them down because you're coveting the things that they have, then how can God bless you with the things that He has for you when you're not even in a position to celebrate the things that God has given to other people? Because if you can't celebrate um, the blessings of other people, then how can you expect those blessings for yourself? Like, how does one expect to be blessed when they can't celebrate the blessings of someone else? Why would someone think they should be blessed and someone else shouldn't be blessed? Like, why would someone think that that's okay? Why would someone feel comfortable with that and feel that God should bless them, even though they feel that the other person who is blessed shouldn't be blessed? So they shouldn't be blessed, but then you should be blessed. And somehow, that should just balance the scales and work in your favor. And so these are things that you have to ask yourself. And, if you're very truthful and honest with yourself, you will see that it doesn't make sense to think that you should be blessed when you think someone else shouldn't be blessed. And especially if, if they're blessed, it's because God blessed them. And He had a reason why He blessed them. And it's none of our business why someone is blessed. And you know, with coveting, we kind of think that they shouldn't be blessed and that it should always be us. So yeah, money's another one. Money's another one. People think that, by having money, coveting people's money, wanting someone's money and or wanting money in general, that is just going to make everything great in their life. And we do need money in this world. I'm not trying to say that we don't need money. We do need money, but money is by far not the most important thing in this world to need. It really isn't. And we should be putting ourselves at a place where it's about God first, and God will supply everything that we need for us. He will supply. He will supply. And it sometimes may not look like it's a lot of money, but He'll take care of us. And He will make sure that we are taken care of. And so money, and like I said, people, like people wanting to take people's spouses, people wanting to take friendships. They feel that they should have these friendships. Jobs, that's another one. People feeling that they should have certain jobs that they don't even have the qualifications for. I think about the Apostle Paul, and when he said, like when he was anointed, and he was anointed to as apostle to the Gentiles, and he said that he always wanted to have something that no one else has worked on. He always wanted a foundation that no one else has worked on. Like, he just wanted something that was fresh that he could work on. Now, to me, that is someone that's an inspirational person, and that is someone who doesn't want to steal from anyone else. He said he didn't want it to be, thought of, that he, built upon someone else's success. But there are a lot of people who want to build on other people's success, and they covet the success of someone else, and they want to tear that person down, and then think, and I've said this before, like succession planning, that they're going to just swoop in, and no one's going to notice because they're going to make sure that they're just like the person, and everything